Can a poem be more honest when it stops trying to look sincere and starts wearing diamonds? This piece from 11 June 2026 describes the career of Chelsey Minnis as a 25-year project of dismantling the notion that poetry must be a quiet, authentic overflow of feeling. It considers why a frying pan full of diamonds or a crotch sparkle might be a more honest way to capture experience than the traditional pursuit of sincerity. By leaning into the aesthetics of noir and the performance of glamour, Minnis suggests that the world is often most visible when it is most stylized. Written by Jordan Castro in the Paris Review Daily, narrated for Arva.
Seth Lemons via Wikimedia Commons, licensed under CC by 2.0. Early on in Opera Fever, her newest collection of poetry, Chelsey Minnis asks, is this a poem or the back of a shovel? Something that can literally take off the back of your head. This January, I read a dozen or so noir novels from the 30s and 40s. People were smothered with towels, bludgeoned in bathtubs, beaten to death with glass decanters, and killed by stray bullets at dance marathons. Some weeks, I watched a noir film every night. I watched YouTube videos about noir. Noir, one video explained, was a reaction to the Depression and the war. It gave form to a cynical vision of American life, depicting an amoral and violent world that many had come to think of as the dark reality underlying ordinary experience. The darkness feels revelatory and real, yet this effect was achieved through surreal German expressionist-influenced artifice. Noir is highly stylized, chiaroscuro lighting, rain-slicked streets, hard-boiled speech, and yet it is one of the 20th century's great visual languages for representing reality. When I first became interested in literature at 14, I was obsessed with realism in the form of authenticity. Writing, I thought, was self-expression. The more honest it was, and the more devoid of unnecessary flourish, the better. I liked Kmart realism and so-called alt-lit, in which authors expressed their bleak worldviews simply, in a seemingly unmediated manner. I listened to rap music, where being real was the arch virtue. But the older I got, the more realness as an aesthetic value felt pale and inadequate, if not diluted and impossible. Art that had once seemed to me naively to express real life increasingly felt like an elaborate construction that used authenticity as a kind of crutch. Every so-called realism implicitly made claims about what counted as real and what didn't. But more obviously artificial modes know what noir's aestheticized realism inadvertently shows, that the world isn't simply there, but stylized into visibility.
Poetry, Wordsworth wrote, is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Rilke counseled Franz Xaver Kappes, a young poet, to write about your sorrows, your wishes, your passing thoughts, with fervent, quiet, and humble sincerity. Poetry, Robert Frost later offered, is when an emotion has found its thought, and the thought has found words. But for Chelsey Minnis, poetry is a frying pan full of diamonds, and humorous like a crotch sparkle. It is like lickable mink, like crying while trying on different outfits, meat-colored candy, a black letter in a black envelope, like getting your cage pushed from room to room, a fresh sheep's heart in a mirrored box. What is poetry? Chelsey Minnis has been asking and answering this question since 2001. For the past 25 years, she has waged a sustained assault on the ideology of poetic sincerity, the belief that poetry becomes more truthful as it becomes more emotionally direct. Hers is one of the most exciting and ambitious contemporary literary projects that I know of. Her poems are blackly comic and hypnotically dense, filled with jarring juxtapositions and metaphors. They pressurize language until it becomes shiny and sharp, like the synthetic diamond from which her first collection, Zirconia, takes its title. With relatively few key words, fur, poem, baby, love, among others, her poetry achieves what all great poetry achieves, the creation of a world,
with its own internal energy and logic that permits nothing outside it and feels new again upon rereading. Self-aware and playful, many of her poems describe themselves. They are like waking up drunk in a lemon-yellow room, or like being slapped with a fish. Feelings appear most authentically when dressed up in diamonds and fur. Minnis exposes poetic sincerity as a genre convention, then replaces it with a more honest fakery. Zirconia, 2001, establishes the linguistic and thematic tropes that still occupy her: sex, violence, glamour. The speaker in one poem opines, "Someone should knock me down and press me against blue tile, and shuck a gold sheath off me, and push a shiny buzzer to make me slide down a glistening chute." In her second collection, Bad Bad, 2007, the conventions of the genre are foregrounded only to be perverted.
The book includes no less than 68 prefaces, many of which emphasize poetry's status as an activity of leisure and object of luxury. Poetry careers are a bad business, number 2. I would rather have a Gucci bag than a poem, number 6. If poetry is dead, then good, number 9. As in Zirconia, pages at a time are made up primarily of ellipses. These poems never let one forget that one is reading a poem. Poemland, 2009, extends this metapoetic conceit, repeatedly redescribing poetry with imagistic metaphors. This is a cut-down chandelier. This is a seeping crystal. This is soft baby clumsiness, and the balls roll loudly across the floor. The "this" that repeats across each page slips between the poem, writing the poem, and poetry itself. The cover of Poemland doesn't display the author's name, only a barcode against a backdrop of bright pink fur. Baby I Don't Care, 2018, shifts Minnis's focus to the conventions of romance. Like poetry, love in Minnis's work is not deep feeling, but inherited, theatrical speech. The collection repurposes Turner Classic movie lines, film noir, and other old Hollywood tropes. Darling, pull yourself together. You're a tiger-skin rug of a man. I am a thing to be loved. Her most recent collection, Opera Fever, published in April by Wave Books, achieves a total synthesis of all her work so far. It gathers her major materials and sharpens them: the damaged glamour of Zirconia, the anti-poetic self-awareness of Bad Bad, the recursive ars poetica of Poemland, and the cinematic address of Baby I Don't Care. Everything returns with a kind of late-style grandeur. Her speaker loves with a violenceness, and all the nuance of uranium. Death is a mirrored headboard, a man with doll's eyes, and everyone topless in diamond necklaces. Luxury objects, gendered violence, fake old movie-sounding dialogue, commentary on poetry itself, all are raised to the level of opera. More melodramatic, more death-haunted, more musical, more artificial. In all her poems, language has an immediate effect that is perhaps even more important than its literal meaning. It's vital and surprising. Every poem has an electric, I want to share this right now quality. Minnis is endlessly quotable, Dwight Garner writes in his New York Times review of Baby I Don't Care, so one has to work hard not to quote her endlessly. But then, sometimes the only way to talk about this poet is to let her talk. I'd like to let her talk here too. Here is an excerpt from Opera Fever. I don't go around popping balloons with my cigarette. I like to look at you through my drink. I never wrote anything on a mirror with lipstick. I sat at my abandoned poetry booth, while autumn burned down like scenery. Do you think poetry is mud on your pillow? For someone very deserving of flavored syrup. What do you want with a lot of filthy roses? I loved you like a floating explosive, so I wrote a letter with a broken clasp. I don't go around popping balloons with my cigarette. I like to look at you through my drink. I never wrote anything on a mirror with lipstick. I sat at my abandoned poetry booth, while autumn burned down like scenery. Do you think poetry is mud on your pillow? For someone very deserving of flavored syrup. What do you want with a lot of filthy roses? I loved you like a floating explosive, so I wrote a letter with a broken clasp. Because each collection works as a whole, her work is difficult to render well out of context and difficult to write about.
Another Wordsworth quote comes to mind. Every great and original writer must himself create the taste by which he is to be relished. Minnis stages a world in which feeling is manufactured through inherited aesthetic forms. Through a kind of alchemy of artifice, she illuminates the depth and the transcendence of the surface, and creates a fugue in which images glimmer, collide, and collapse. Love is violence, and poetry is artifice, and love is artifice, and violence is violence. Everything's ironic, and what emerges is an esoteric system of near symbols, in which image and impression, simile and sensation, merge into a dazzling, demented, often hilarious performance. Her poems are not emotion recollected in tranquility. They are like a clear vinyl raincoat over you. The thing is, you can still be stabbed through the raincoat. Next article. Share.